This is the story of the Hatseller and the monkeys. A Hatseller once made two kinds of hats. He made debiri hats that he wove from tall grasses, and he made Fulani hats that he made by pressing small pieces of cloth together. Now, these hats he sold in a special way. He carried them on his hands and on his head. And he would walk through town calling, "Hi May Nu, Nuncoin Karisa," which means, selling hats is the most wonderful thing in the world. And so it is. Well, one day the hat seller heard that there was to be a festival in a nearby town. Now the hat seller thought, if I get there early enough before the festival starts, perhaps folks who are going to the festival will want to buy a new hat. And so the hat seller decided to get up very early so that he had time to travel to the festival town. So the next morning, just as the sun was rising, the hat seller woke up. And he put his debiri hats on his hands, and he put his Fulani hats on his head, and he walked out of town toward the festival town. He got up so early that he forgot to eat breakfast. Bum, bum, bum. Well, he walked along and he walked along, and the sun rose higher in the sky, and the hat seller grew hot and tired. Up ahead, he saw a great tree. He thought, I could just rest under that tree for a while, and then I will feel better. And then I will travel on to the festival town, and I will still get there in plenty of time. So he walked in under the tree, and he took his debiri hats off of his hands, and he set them around him. And he took his Fulani hats off of his head, and he set those around him too. And he settled himself under the tree. He stretched out his legs. He took one debiri hat, and he put it over his face to block the light as he took a nap. Well, he placed his hands in his lap. He settled his debiri hat on his face, and he went to sleep. He slept for a long time. Now the hat seller did not know that this was a very special tree. All the monkeys in the area came flocking to that tree because it was a mango tree. Now, when the hat seller went to sleep under the tree was full of monkeys, and they were curious. Yoli, 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 they crept down out of the branches to peer at the hat seller lying under the tree. When they got closer, they saw all of his beautiful hats, and one by one they climbed down, yoli, 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 and each one grabbed a hat and scurried back up into the branches. Yoli, yoli, yoli. Now, the hat seller woke up. He felt refreshed and rested and ready to travel to the festival town. But when he looked around to pick up his hats, they were gone. He looked to the left of him, no hats. He looked to the right of him, no hats. He looked in front of him, no hats. He looked behind the tree, no hats. And then he looked up in the tree, and what do you think he saw? Monkeys. And on every monkey's head was one of his hats. Well, the Hatseller was so upset he shook his fist at the monkeys. He said, "You monkeys, you give me back my hats." And from up in the tree, the monkeys shook their fist at him. Hoop, 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 hoop. Well, that just made the peddler madder. He shook both of his fists at the monkeys. "You monkeys, you give me back my hats." And from up in the tree, the monkeys shook their fists at him. Hoop, 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 hoop. Well, that just made the Hatseller even madder. He stamped his feet at the monkeys. "You monkeys, you give me back my hats." And from up in the tree, the monkeys stamped their feet at him. Hoop, 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 hoop. Well, the Hatseller was very upset. The monkeys had his hats. This was not working. He looked around. He saw a stick on the ground. He picked up the stick and he threw the stick at the monkeys. Well, the monkeys grabbed leaves and threw them down at the Hatseller, and the leaves floated down around him. Now the Hatseller looked around. He saw a stone on the ground. He picked up the stone and he threw it at the monkeys. Now there weren't any stones in the tree, but there were mangoes. Each monkey picked a mango and threw it down at the Hatseller. Down came the mangoes. Suddenly, the Hatseller was surrounded by the smell of sweet, delicious, ripe mangoes. His tummy rumbled. He remembered that he had gotten up so early that he had forgotten to eat breakfast. Bum, bum, bum. Well, he bent down and he picked up a mango and he ate it. He ate another and another and another. And suddenly his brain began to work. Everyone knows that breakfast is the most important meal. Everyone knows that to make sure your brain is working, you've got to eat a good breakfast. Now the Hatseller's brain began to work. He thought about what had happened. The monkeys had all his hats. When he shook a fist at the monkeys, they shook a fist at him. When he stamped his feet at the monkeys, they stamped their feet at him. When he threw sticks, they threw leaves. When he threw a stone, they threw mangoes. Thought the peddler. Now he took that one Dabiri hat that he had, and he stepped out from under the tree. He put that Dabiri hat on his head, and then he took it off and he waved it to make sure that the monkeys could see him. Then he put it on his head and took it off. Put it on and took it off. He put it on and then he threw it down to the ground. And suddenly, from up in the tree, down came every one of his hats. Well, the Hatseller hurried to pick up all of his hats and put them back on his hands and his head. And when his hats were settled, he set off again toward the festival town, singing, "Hi May, Haime nu nuncoin karisa, which means selling hats is the most wonderful thing in the world. And so it is.